This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Good morning, I'm John Trout. It's Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
Learning more about the deadly school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin, and the shooters.
Identifying a motive is our top priority.
I'm Clayton Neville.
The man accused of killing United Healthcare's CEO has been charged with murder as an act of terrorism.
Well-planned, targeted murder.
I'm Haya Panjwani.
A vote later today in the Senate could expand Social Security payments for firefighters and police officers. I'm Pamela Furr.
The Energy Department has released a long-awaited study on the environmental and economic impacts of natural gas exports. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
On Wall Street, the Dow's on its longest losing streak since the 1970s, and the Fed may announce a rate cut today. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
Donald Trump's lawyers are alleging that his hush money conviction was tainted by juror misconduct. Julie Walker, New York.
All ahead on America in the Morning. More is being learned about the 15-year-old girl who opened fire inside a Christian school in Madison, Wisconsin, killing a teacher and classmate. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports police are still trying to figure out why it happened.
Police in Madison say the 15-year-old shooter killed a teacher and a student at Abundant Life Christian School before killing herself. Vice President Kamala Harris now addressing the latest school shooting in America.
Another community being torn about and torn apart by gun violence. And, of course, our nation mourns for those who were killed, and we pray for the recovery of those who were injured and for the entire community.
Police in Madison gave an update yesterday and had a clarification on who called 911 to report the shooting.
After looking at the computer-aided dispatch system, it seems as if a call came from a second grader. It actually read, the call came from a second grade teacher. That was a mistake. That's my responsibility, and I apologize, and I clarify that today. It did not come from a second grader. It read second grade teacher.
Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes.
Identifying a motive is our top priority. But at this time, it appears that the motive was a combination of factors.
The chief didn't expand on that front, but he did say the teenager's online presence is being looked at.
There are always signs of a school shooting before it occurred. We're looking into her online activity. We're asking anyone who knew her or who may have insights into her feelings leading up to yesterday to please contact the Madison area Crime Stoppers.
There has been speculation online about the gender identity of the shooter, and the chief was asked about that.
I don't know whether Natalie was transgender or not. And quite frankly, I don't think that's even important. I don't think that's important at all.
Meanwhile, the mayor of Madison, Satya Rhodes Conway, stern with reporters yesterday when asked about the identities of the victims, which still haven't been released.
It is absolutely none of y'all's business who was harmed in this incident. Please have some human decency and respect for the people who lost loved ones or were injured themselves or whose children were injured. Just have some human decency, folks.
I'm Clayton Neville.
The man accused of killing the CEO of United Healthcare in New York City was indicted for first-degree murder. As correspondent Haya Panjwani reports, those charges also include the death as an act of terrorism.
There is no heroism in what Mangione did. This was a senseless act of violence. It was a cold and calculated crime that stole a life and put New Yorkers at risk.
The man accused of killing United Healthcare's CEO has been charged with murder as an act of terrorism.
Luigi Mangione, the defendant, is charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of murder in the second degree, including 1 count of murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism.
Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg at a news conference.
For nearly an hour, we allege the defendant waited in the area near the Hilton Hotel, waiting for Mr. Thompson to appear. From 6:38 a.m. to 6:44 a.m., the defendant stood across from the entrance of the hotel on West 54th Street. When he saw Mr. Thompson, he crossed the street and approached him from behind. We allege he then took out a 9mm 3D printed ghost gun, equipped with a 3D printed suppressor, and shot him once in the back and once in the leg. The defendant then fled.
Luigi Mangione was already charged with murder in the killing of Brian Thompson, but this terror allegation brought forward by Bragg is new.
This was a frightening, well-planned, targeted murder that was intended to cause shock and attention and intimidation. It occurred in one of the most bustling parts of our city.
Under New York law, a charge like this is brought when an alleged crime is trying to intimidate or coerce people or the government through murder, assassination, or kidnapping. Thompson, who was 50, was shot dead as he walked to a Manhattan hotel where Minnesota-based United Healthcare, the United States' biggest medical insurer, was holding an investor conference. I'm Haya Panjwani.
United Healthcare stock takes a tumble. More on that in our business segment. Coming up next, U.S. senators tackle Social Security benefits when America in the Morning continues after these messages. Welcome back. Here with America in the Morning. Rain and snow forecast for the West today. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton with the national forecast.
A storm that delivered a soaking rain to parts of the Pacific Northwest on Tuesday will continue eastward today, but even though the original storm loses steam over the course of the day, allowing for precipitation to end over the high ground of Washington and Oregon, this feature hands off some energy to a developing Alberta clipper through the day. This means that precipitation picks up in intensity for a time today over eastern Washington and northern Idaho, where it could be mainly rain, before reaching the Montana border, where mainly snow is expected. As the clipper slides across the Canadian border into eastern Montana, an icy mix of snow, sleet, and freezing rain is more likely there, with all snow instead for western North Dakota later in the day, then spreading across the upper Midwest later tonight. South of those areas, a vast swath of the country from Wyoming through the high plains and westward right to the coast of California has a dry Wednesday in store under the latest round of high pressure. Even much of the central and southern plains turns drier and cooler as well behind a cold front, and southern and eastern portions of the Midwest also dry out and may start to clear out as precipitation comes to an end. However, that same storm will be the main weather player for much of the east today, with the risk for rain and thunder extending from central Texas across northern Mississippi and even into south central Kentucky. Showers and storms may approach parts of the southeast coast by the afternoon, with the Florida Peninsula again the focus for some better coverage of storms. Showers can also occur from the central Gulf Coast into Virginia, with some steadier rain from southern New England to western Tennessee, and snow from Michigan to northern New York. In Nashville, it's a cloudy and mild day today with rain and a thunderstorm as an early high of 63 leads to temperatures falling into the 40s. In Salt Lake City, look for some sun with a high of 50. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. Later this morning, the U.S. Senate will try to pass legislation aimed at providing full Social Security benefits to millions of Americans, but it comes with a price. Pamela Furr has more on the story.
A key test vote to advance the measure is set for 2 o'clock D.C. time today. The bill that would repeal certain benefit reductions for millions of retirees and their spouses will need 60 votes to clear this procedural hurdle and head toward final passage. This would impact those who collect pensions and would now allow them to also collect Social Security. We're talking about firefighters, teachers, postal workers, police officers, and others who worked in public sector type jobs. A provision that limits the benefits allotted to those workers' surviving spouses would also be eliminated. Now, the legislation has already passed in the House in November, so the Senate would need to pass it this week to avoid restarting the process in the new year with a new Congress. Part of the pushback is it would add $200 billion to the federal deficit and increase the rate at which the Social Security Trust Fund becomes insolvent. I'm Pamela Furr.
U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm is warning the incoming Trump administration to proceed cautiously as it considers proposals for new natural gas export terminals. With more on those comments, here's correspondent Lisa Dwyer.
The Energy Department has released a long-awaited study on the environmental and economic impacts of natural gas exports, which have grown exponentially in the past decade. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm warns that unfettered exports of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, could raise wholesale domestic prices by more than 30%. The Biden administration paused approval of new LNG projects in January to study the environmental effects LNG exports have on the planet. While the pause is currently on hold under federal court order, the Energy Department recently said that it will not decide on two major projects in Louisiana until an environmental review is completed. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to end the pause on his first day in office. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
Fed rate cut. Amazon workers strike. Those stories part of Morning Business Headlines when America in the Morning continues after these messages. This is America in the Morning. The Business Report is brought to you by Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, always putting clients' interests first. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. On what's weighing on markets today, here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger.
Wall Street opens this morning after a down day for stocks. The Dow's been down 9 straight days, dragged lower consistently by shares of United Health Group, which started falling the day the CEO of the health insurance business was murdered on the street in New York. Meantime, the Manhattan District Attorneys indicted 26-year-old Luigi Mangione on murder charges for the alleged crime. The maximum penalty would be life in prison. The Dow on its longest losing streak since 1978. So what's going on?
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is a price-weighted index, so the biggest stocks have a very large influence on it. So Verizon at $40 is far less influence on the Dow than United Health at $486. In fact, 1/10 the influence overall. United Health, the second biggest stock by price, is down about 126 points since it began dropping on December 5th. And that's about 800 Dow points.
CNBC's Bob Pisani. The Nasdaq pulled back yesterday, but from a record high, and it's all about tech. Companies whose shares hit fresh all-time highs yesterday include Apple and Google parent Alphabet. Investors hoping for an interest rate cut this afternoon when the Fed finishes its 2-day meeting. A 1/4 percentage point is expected. But some tell CNBC because a cut is baked into stock prices, the Fed might feel it has to cut rates. Many believe it should actually pause today.
Consensus at this point in time is going to push their hand into a cut. And as we think about 2025, it's about setting expectations towards a higher neutral rate at that point in time and allowing the market to recalibrate to that.
Citizens Wealth's Michael Hans on CNBC. Now, when the Fed cuts interest rates, it means you'll pay less on any adjustable rate loans you have and revolving debt like credit cards. If you're carrying a balance, the interest rate on that should go down, although credit card companies have been slow to drop their rates as the Fed has started to cut. Amazon facing more pushback from employees.
Workers at an Amazon delivery station in Skokie, Illinois, voting to authorize a strike, becoming the third such union to do so against Amazon in less than a week. The union had given Amazon a December 15th deadline to agree to come to the table and bargain for a contract.
CNBC's Silvana Hanau. Walmart employees are wearing body cams in some stores. It's a pilot program to see if the cameras help deter conflict and prevent theft. On today's watch list, the Fed will announce that decision this afternoon on interest rates. We also get earnings from Birkenstock, home builder Lennar, Micron, and General Mills. And it's crunch time for retailers. Christmas is 1 week from today.
That's hard to believe. CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. Women's prison, sexual abuse allegations. When America in the Morning continues after these messages. This is America in the Morning. Welcome back. President-elect Donald Trump's attorneys have gone back to a New York court with allegations against the jury in the so-called hush money case. Julie Walker has details.
President-elect Donald Trump's lawyers are alleging that his hush money conviction in New York was tainted by juror misconduct, opening a new front in their fight to overturn the verdict and throw out the historic case. This comes as Manhattan Judge Juan Merchan weighs a defense request to throw out the case in light of Trump's impending return to the White House. Trump's lawyers wrote in a letter to Merchan that they had evidence of grave juror misconduct during the trial. Jurors' names have been kept private, and the details of the allegations were redacted. Merchan wrote that it consists entirely of unsworn allegations. Julie Walker, New York.
The federal government is paying millions of dollars to settle rampant sexual abuse claims at a California women's prison. Correspondent Norman Hall has more on the story.
The government will pay nearly $116 million to resolve lawsuits brought by more than 100 women who say they were abused or mistreated at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. The now shuttered facility was known as the Rape Club because of rampant staff on inmate sexual misconduct. Under approved settlements, the Justice Department will pay an average of about $1.1 million to each of 103 women who filed individual lawsuits against the Bureau of Prisons over their mistreatment. The agency had already agreed to open some of its facilities to a court-appointed monitor and publicly acknowledge pervasive abuse and retaliation at FCI Dublin. I'm Norman Hall.
America in the Morning for Wednesday, December 18th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour.
With the government shutdown deadline looming, congressional leaders unveil a temporary stopgap spending measure. I'm John Stolness in Washington.
President-elect Trump preparing to take office and his legal team hard at work. I'm Clayton Neville.
The latest on war-ravaged Israel, Indiana's execution, and the GOP's January 6th report to be released. We'll have those stories.
Retail sales rose 0.7% in November, according to the Commerce Department. Jennifer King, Washington.
A company that sells replacement winter tires is recalling over 500,000 of them. I'm Haya Panjwani.
Tom Cruise is honored by the Department of the Navy. I'm Kevin Carr.
Back after these messages. Rain in the south will be spreading northward. Welcome back. You're with America in the Morning. Today's national forecast. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
A disturbance that set up over the southern plains on Tuesday evening with showers and even some thunderstorms along a cold front stretching through parts of Oklahoma and Arkansas, and some steadier rain at times farther east into Kentucky will continue to take better shape through the day today. As this storm lifts to the north and east across the Ohio Valley and the Mid-Atlantic, most of the eastern third or so of the nation faces the risk for some form of precipitation today. From the Great Lakes region toward northern New York, active weather takes the form of snow today, with snow showers over Michigan from the Upper Peninsula to northern lower Michigan, and steadier snow elsewhere through the Adirondacks in New York. Farther to the south, rain will be the story instead from southwestern New England through the I-95 corridor toward the nation's capital and into interior sections of the southeast and even northern Louisiana, with thunder most likely from Kentucky into central Texas. More spotty showers may occur right to the Atlantic coast by the end of the day, and there can even be some coastal thunderstorms from Virginia through North Carolina. The Florida Peninsula again looks to be more active, with flow off the Atlantic again providing the moisture for another round of more numerous showers and thunderstorms, some locally heavy, including around the Miami area. Otherwise, much of the nation's center has a dry and cooler Wednesday in store behind the cold front, and even most of the west looks dry as the warmer air stays mainly confined to the desert southwest. However, the latest storm that led to some drenching rain for the Pacific Northwest yesterday pushes into the interior, with rain and snow ending around the Cascades as an Alberta Clipper takes shape, with snow becoming more prevalent from northern Idaho to western Montana and northwestern North Dakota. That's the weather across America. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist LaTroy Thornton.
I'm John Trout. Remember to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. With the deadline of a government shutdown rapidly approaching, congressional leaders unveiled a stopgap spending bill that would fund the government into March. Our John Stolnis is following details on Capitol Hill.
House Speaker Mike Johnson admits the continuing resolution, or CR as it's called, became finalized later than they had originally hoped.
It was intended to be, and it was until recent days, a very simple, very clean CR, a stopgap funding measure to get us into next year when we have unified government under the Republican Party. But a couple of intervening things have occurred.
With a deadline of midnight Friday to get the CR passed by both chambers of Congress and signed by President Biden, time is running out if House Speaker Mike Johnson adheres to his promise of giving his members 72 hours to view the text and to allow it to proceed through regular order and committee approval.
I believe in the 72-hour rule. I've said that to all the House Republicans this morning. I believe we ought to try to pass this on a rule to go through regular process. We're committed to all of that. We're going to take care of these obligations and get this done.
However, it's clear that some on Johnson's right flank are opposed to the measure. Republican Chip Roy frets about the money shifted in Social Security that would actually reduce the length of time until it's insolvent.
We're just fundamentally unserious about spending. And as long as you got a blank check, you can't shrink government. If you can't shrink government, you can't live free.
And Republican Ralph Norman upset the massive spending bill contains money for things on the Democrats' wish list.
Well, we're evidently going to take a 1,800-page document that we really hadn't read and going to pass it, add more debt. Very frustrating. It's opposite of what the Dose Commission is trying to do. So, am I voting for it? No.
Given that opposition and the Republican slim majority, Democratic Congressman Pete Aguilar believes they will once again have to provide the votes necessary to pass the bill for Speaker Johnson.
That has been the case this Congress. It will continue to be the case even in the next Congress. House Republicans are going to need our votes, so we look forward to working with them to be partners in how we fund government.
The 1,500-page CR contains a one-year extension of the Farm Bill, $100 billion in disaster aid, and $10 billion to help farmers. John Stolnis, Washington.
Legal woes continue for President-elect Donald Trump as he prepares to take office. Correspondent Clayton Neville has more.
According to a letter sent by Judge Juan Merchan to Trump's lawyers, the president-elect alleges there was juror misconduct in the hush money trial that led to his conviction. The case surrounded hush money payments made to porn star Stormy Daniels to cover up an alleged affair that Trump denies. In fact, he's long cried foul on the case.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt.
At the time of the conviction, he called it election interference.
We have a country that's in big trouble, but this was a rigged decision right from day one.
Of course, Trump went on to win the election, and Judge Merchan said in the letter that the allegations should be made public for the sake of transparency, and that it should also have redactions to protect juror privacy and safety. It's not clear, though, when that'll happen or how much will be revealed in that process. Meanwhile, the Trump legal team is now suing the Des Moines Register and its parent company over its publication of a poll before the election that Trump called fraud and election interference for saying he trailed Vice President Kamala Harris in Iowa. And there's more reaction to ABC News' settlement with Trump for $15 million surrounding anchor George Stephanopoulos. NBC host Chuck Todd told Fox News this week that he would have felt abandoned. I'm Clayton Neville.
From the Middle East this morning, Israel announced it would be maintaining a presence in an area of the Golan Heights occupied by Syria. Washington correspondent Saker Magani reports this comes as a lawsuit's been filed against the U.S. State Department, saying it is arming Israel despite claims the Israeli military is allegedly committing human rights abuses in Gaza.
A lawsuit accuses the State Department of creating loopholes to give Israel a pass on a law restricting aid to foreign militaries over human rights abuses. The suit was filed by some Palestinians in Gaza and their American relatives, like Ahmed Moore in Philadelphia.
Our goal in pushing the U.S. government to adhere to U.S. law is to prevent further atrocities from developing.
The so-called Leahy Law bars military aid to foreign military units when there's credible evidence of human rights abuses. Former State Department official Charles Blaha says there is evidence of that by some Israeli units. But Secretary of State Antony Blinken's allowed them to slide and get aid.
Every single decision has resulted in those units being eligible.
Blinken has denied any double standard, but former state officials say the U.S. has effectively exempted Israel from enforcement. Moore wants it all to change.
It's a lawsuit where our plaintiffs are telling the U.S. government, obey the law. It's a very simple ask. We're just asking the U.S. government to stop sending U.S. weapons to abusive Israeli units who have been using these weapons to kill Palestinians.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli forces will stay in a buffer zone on the Syrian border for the foreseeable future. Standing atop Mount Hermon, about 6 miles from Syria's border with the Israeli-held Golan Heights, Netanyahu said Israeli troops will remain until another agreement is found to ensure the Jewish state's security. Israel's capture of the demilitarized area in Syrian territories drawing criticism that it's violated a 1974 ceasefire setting up the buffer zone. UN spokesman Stefan Dujarric says a deal is a deal.
Occupation is occupation. Whether it lasts a week, a month, or a year, it remains occupation.
Sagar Magani, Washington.
When we return on America in the Morning, Liz Cheney and the Capitol riot. GOP says there's more questions than answers after these messages. This is America in the Morning. Welcome back. I'm John Trout. One person's dead, another 9 have been hospitalized after a gunman opened fire outside of Baltimore last night. Towson, Maryland police are calling it a mass shooting incident, and it may have been targeted. Officers who were the first to arrive on the scene found a car on its side and on fire. The incident happened outside of a funeral home. Towson, Maryland police are expected to release more details sometime this morning. The House GOP has wrapped up their own investigation on the January 6, 2021 events at the U.S. Capitol and is pointing fingers at former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. More on the story from correspondent Lisa Dwyer.
House Republicans have concluded it's former GOP representative Liz Cheney who should be prosecuted for her participation in the congressional probe. The findings echo Trump's desire to punish his perceived enemies, including Cheney and members of the January 6th committee that Trump says should be in jail. Cheney says that the report disregards the truth. Trump is working to staff his administration with officials at the highest levels who appear like-minded in Trump's efforts at retribution. Donald Trump was indicted on 4 criminal charges, including conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. Special counsel Jack Smith has since abandoned the case against Trump ahead of the inauguration in adherence to Justice Department guidelines that sitting presidents cannot be charged. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
A report out on last month's retail sales shows some positives for the economy as we head toward the end of the year. Correspondent Jennifer King reports.
Retail sales rose 0.7% in November, according to the latest report from the Commerce Department. It's a healthy gain from October's half-point increase. Sales at auto dealers jumped 2.6%, driving most of the gain. Analysts say that likely reflected a need for new cars in parts of the country slammed by Hurricane Helene. With consumers in the early phase of the holiday shopping season, sales rose modestly for sporting goods, furniture, electronics, and building materials, while spending was down for groceries and at restaurants and bars. Today's report arrives just a day before the Fed announces its latest rate decision on Wednesday. Economists and Wall Street are expecting a quarter-point rate decrease and a slower pace of rate cuts next year than previously signaled. Jennifer King, Washington.
With some states already deluged with snow, the last thing you need are defective tires. Correspondent Haya Panjwani reports on a massive snow tire recall.
A company that sells replacement winter tires is recalling over 500,000 of them in the United States. That's because they don't have enough snow traction to meet North American standards. Prinks Changshan Tire North America is recalling certain Fortune Tormenta and Prinks High Country tires with 3 Peak Mountain snowflake symbols on the sidewalls. The company says the tires passed European tests, but likely wouldn't meet traction standards in North America. U.S. safety regulators say tires without sufficient snow traction can increase the risk of a crash. The company is working on a way to fix the problem. Owners will be notified by letter starting in February. I'm Haya Panjwani.
As the clock struck midnight, James Corcoran was given his last meal request of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and awaited a lethal injection in the Indiana State Prison. Corcoran was found guilty in the 1997 murders of 4 people, including his brother and future brother-in-law. Corcoran's attorneys argued that their client should not be put to death because he's mentally ill and unable to understand the severity of his crimes. He was on death row for 25 years. Last-ditch efforts to spare his life were denied, first by the U.S. Supreme Court and last by Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb, who said he would let the legal system play out before making his decision. Indiana's last state execution was carried out in 2009, although there have been 13 executions in the federal prison in Terre Haute since then. A Ukrainian official tells the Associated Press his country carried out the bombing of a top Russian general in Moscow, an assassination of the Kremlin's chief of the military's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection forces. The Pentagon quick to distance themselves from any U.S. involvement, correspondent Donna Warder reports.
Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov was head of Russia's nuclear, biological, and chemical defense forces, and he was killed by a bomb one day after Ukraine's security agency charged him with using banned chemical weapons during Russia's military operation in Ukraine. A Ukrainian official says the country's security service carried out the attack, and the bomb, which was hidden in a scooter outside Kirillov's apartment building in Moscow, went off as the general left for his office. His assistant also was killed. Russian news reports say the bomb was triggered remotely. Kirillov was under sanctions from several countries, including the UK and Canada, for his actions in Moscow's war in Ukraine. I'm Donna Warder.
Sports is in. Here's Robert Workman.
The Milwaukee Bucks have won this year's NBA Cup, thumping the Thunder 97-81 in the final in Las Vegas last night. Giannis Antetokounmpo had 26 points, 19 rebounds, and 10 assists. College basketball, number 1 Tennessee rolled over Western Carolina 84-36. The Vols improved to 11-0. Number 2 Auburn had no trouble with Georgia State. Number 5 Duke handled George Mason, and 7th-ranked Florida topped North Carolina at the Jumpman Invitational in Charlotte. NHL, Patrick Laine's hat trick led the Canadians to a 6-1 romp over the Sabres. That's his 11th career hatter and Buffalo's 11th consecutive loss. Hurricanes blanked the Islanders 4-0. Pyotr Kochetkov stopped 32 shots. Coach Rod Brindamore.
Like to see them. We were a little loosey, but it kind of sometimes happens when you get an early lead. Like it's just sometimes hard to, stick with it. And he was great all night. Looked like he was dialed right in.
Shutouts for the Senators and Predators. Bruins and Penguins came through in overtime. Wins for the Jets, Devils, Blackhawks, and Lightning. Another big name to the Yankees, outfielder Cody Bellinger, acquired from the Cubs for pitcher Cody Poteet. Bellinger, whose father Clay played in the Bronx for 3 years at the turn of the century, joins pitchers Max Fried and Devin Williams as part of New York's reload after Juan Soto left for the Mets. College football, the Frisco Bowl last night in Texas. Number 25 Memphis outgunned West Virginia 42-37. Returning to the gridiron, Michael Vick, the former Virginia Tech star and overall number 1 NFL draft pick by the Falcons. He accepted the head coaching job at Norfolk State. That's about 20 miles from his hometown of Newport News. It'll be his first coaching job. Speaking of the Falcons, Atlanta has benched quarterback Kirk Cousins in favor of rookie Michael Penix Jr., who was chosen with the 8th pick in last spring's draft, just weeks after Cousins signed a free agent deal. That's Wednesday Sports.
When we return on America in the Morning, Navy honors Maverick after these messages. You're with America in the Morning. One of the roles actor Tom Cruise is famous for is playing a naval aviator hero in films. Now he's being honored by the Navy for his theatrical heroics. Kevin Carr has the story.
Tom Cruise has played many roles, but he's probably best known for playing a naval pilot in 1986's Top Gun and its billion-dollar sequel, Top Gun Maverick, in 2022. Now Cruise has been officially decorated by the Navy.
So, Mr. Cruise, again, on behalf of all the American people, on behalf of our sailors and Marines, it is my honor now to present this award.
At Longcross Studios in the UK on Tuesday, the Secretary of the Navy, Carlos Del Toro, presented Cruise with the Distinguished Public Service Award, the highest honor that can be bestowed upon a civilian outside of the Department of the Navy. The Navy said that Cruise's roles have, quote, increased public awareness and appreciation for the Navy's highly trained personnel and the sacrifices they make while in uniform. Cruise has also portrayed military characters in films like A Few Good Men and Born on the 4th of July, and he graciously accepted the honor.
And I accept this on behalf of not just myself, but our entire cast, our crew, our writers, directors, the studios in Hollywood who are so dedicated to helping. I admire all of the servicemen and women.
In 2020, Cruise and Top Gun producer Jerry Bruckheimer were named honorary Navy aviators for their work in promoting the Navy in cinema.
To lead is to serve. And I know that to my core.
Cruise is currently in the UK shooting Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning for release next summer. I'm Kevin Carr.
What do Cheech and Chong, Star Trek, Dirty Dancing, and Beverly Hills Cop all have in common? Entertainment correspondent Margie Zaraletta explains they're all part of the 25 films being added to the Library of Congress National Film Registry.
I wonder what Great Dane tastes like, man.
The Library of Congress has decided Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke is worth preserving forever. It's one of 25 movies added to the library's National Film Registry for their cultural, historical, or aesthetic significance. Dirty Dancing, Beverly Hills Cop, and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan made the cut this year. So did The Miracle Worker with Anne Bancroft, Spy Kids, No Country for Old Men, and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
If you guys were the inventors of Facebook, you'd have invented Facebook.
The newest film is The Social Network from 2010. The oldest is Annabelle's Snake Dance from 1895, a minute-long film of dancer Annabelle Moore that was considered scandalous at the time. I'm Archie Zaraletta.
America in the Morning for Wednesday, December 18th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.